Hi, my name is Stephanie. Thank you for joining us today. Our webinar topic today is how to deliver a lot of high-quality services consistently, and we're going to help you overcome the 4 big challenges. A few quick notes. I am recording the event today, so you will receive an email from me with a link to the recording as well as the slides that Don and Jeff used. Also, later in our presentation, Jeff will be doing a live demonstration in our portal. You may find it helpful to go to full screen if you are not there already. Give you a little larger view of the portal content. I think at this point we're all set, so I'm going to turn it over to Don Casson, CEO of Evergreen Systems. Don?
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. I'm Don Casson, CEO of Evergreen, and with me today is my partner in crime, Jeff Benedict, who heads up Evergreen's ITSM practice and leads our innovation efforts. If you're new to our series of webinars, welcome. If you're a past attendee, thanks for joining us again. Our goal, as always, is to share valuable information and insights you can use in your planning and activities right now. The topic we'll explore today is essentially overcoming the 4 challenges to delivering a lot of high-quality services. So here's our agenda. After a little teeny bit about Evergreen, we'll dive into the topic, and beyond that, we'll briefly demonstrate the concepts we're going to cover today in our always evolving view of a very advanced self-service catalog and portal experience, which happens to be built on ServiceNow. Then we'll answer questions if you have any. Evergreen is a U.S.-based consulting firm. We've worked with hundreds of mid-market, Fortune 1000, and public sector organizations to improve their IT service management execution. Over the past 18 years, we've done over 4,000 projects. We're a full lifecycle firm, which means we have both process and technology consulting in one company. The benefit of that is our customers don't have to be the systems integrator, which allows them to put more of their energy and focus on the problem at hand. We are one of only two top-tier U.S. ServiceNow partners, Gold. Now that Fruition is CSC Global and the Cloud Sherpas is Accenture. And last, we have well over a decade of domain expertise across the ServiceNow portfolio, but we view all of this from a perspective we call customer-centric service management. At Evergreen, we think traditional ITSM thinking is just plain wrong because it puts the customer, the people we're doing this for, last. It's hard to believe, but it's absolutely true. In most cases, it takes a couple of years for us to even think about it. It's kind of like that game, Where's Waldo? I love this slide. So I've read books by all these guys. Almost 3 years ago now, we really took notice of the beautiful self-service experiences we were having as consumers with Zappos, Apple, Google, Amazon, and Uber. And we wondered how come our ITSM customers can't have the same thing. We started challenging our thinking in ITSM, and as a result began looking at everything we did from the customer in rather than IT out. And we call that customer-centric IT service management. If we start with a customer, we actually do things differently. We focus on preventing incidents rather than just handling them. We use self-service and automation across ITSM to make customers happier and reduce the work of IT. Both are possible. We see services as end-to-end team value chains rather than disconnected silos of activity. And this better understanding leads naturally to better, smaller changes. Sounds kind of like DevOps, right? With less change failures because we know better. And knowledge can become something entirely different. It can become a powerful, beautiful, self-enablement experience we use to change the value of the technology our employees have. 90% of our customers, just my commercial, start with a 2-week strategy and roadmap engagement, mainly because a lot of this is new territory for them. We have delivered this particular engagement a couple dozen times now, and this is around customer-centric ITSM, service catalog services, IT service automation, that kind of a topic set. So since we've done it a couple of dozen times, we get terrific reuse, which has allowed us to continually bring more and more value to this for the price. So not only does it give you a detailed 3-phase strategy and roadmaps, you've got clear directions, it brings all the IP we've developed to help you in this process. We work with your team to help you create an initial working service taxonomy using our mind map application, which you get to keep. And normally that's $7,500 in its own right. We work through defining service ownership from the perspective of roles and responsibilities, and you have an initial RACI map deliverable for your service mapping and your ownership. We guide you through our detailed service design process, working together to build several sample services with your team, hands-on. You keep the process to build more. We deliver the findings in executive briefing, along with a phase 1 statement of work for your use, however you choose to proceed. Last but not least, and this is what's really fun and different about it, we create a working future state employee self-service catalog and portal demo sandbox for you with your look and feel, which you can then use along with your roadmap to actually demonstrate what the future of customer-centric service might look like in your organization. All this is done in 2 weeks for $17,500, and we unconditionally guarantee it. So, technology provider or strategic services partner? That's the question we have to answer in general today. It's quite possible that only a few people in our IT organization could explain the difference. Innovative IT organizations are beginning to understand their value is in delivering what the customer needs and wants in a high-quality experience that meets the customer's expectations. But they don't actually have to provide the technology solution because the customer who pays the bills doesn't care about that. They only care about the functionality. This, in turn, is leading IT to focus on true services rather than just technical outcomes, which is fueling the emergence of this role we call the service owner, someone who owns the outcome the customer really wants from end to end. Every now and then I get to throw a fun slide in, so here's the oddball for this webinar. Sometimes it helps to take examples from outside our business to get better clarity on what we're doing and to explain it to other people more easily. So here's a fun one. If IT was a grocery store, there would be only one brand of corn, IT corn. That's all anyone would ever need. And naturally, we would make every single can of it. But when Safeway runs a grocery store, they have half a dozen brands of corn on the shelf, i.e. in their service catalog, including the Safeway brand, because customers want reasonable variety and choice. Safeway realizes that to really serve their customers, they don't have to make everything they sell, because the customer doesn't care about that at all. Safeway is a modern service broker of canned vegetables. Okay, so now be serious. We usually talk about the functional areas of customer-centric service management, like the catalog, the service taxonomy, the service portfolio, the service demand, the service governance factors, and then how they help you deliver IT services better. For this webinar, I decided to turn it around, thinking maybe from the customer in perhaps, and ask myself, what are the 4 big challenges you face in delivering lots of great services? These 4 came to mind: volume, consistency, durability, and quality. There are certainly others, but these are 4 pretty good ones we see a lot in our work. Then for each challenge, I decided to ask 4 questions. What's the nature of it? What impact does that cause? How do we fix it? And what is the benefit of doing so? It was actually a pretty fun exercise. I hope you guys enjoy it. It starts simply enough. We get a good technology platform, and it's easy to build services with the nice workflow tools. We know our customers want services, so we start cranking them out. Pretty soon, a bunch of parts of IT get on the train and start building services too, because making stuff as fast as possible is something we are really good at. If you need an example, remember how we created 100,000 CIs. Pretty soon, we have hundreds of services built. Now the trouble emerges. Customers can't find what they want because the services aren't organized or managed in any logical fashion, and the descriptions are in IT language, not English. The providers can't understand hundreds of services, so they get lost too, not sure what they are or how to deliver them. The managers, well, what they know most is that both the customers and the providers don't like the services or the service catalog. Oops. So everyone follows the path of least resistance and goes back to working the way they did in the past. So our problem is that we have built a confusing mess by rushing in. We need to back up and think. What needs to be in place for us to build, deliver, and manage hundreds of services that customers will use and like? That's the key question. Here are 4 levers to fixing the demand problem, fixing volume. The first is let's not overproduce. Every service we create will take time and energy to build, deliver, and manage. Every service we create will increase the complexity of our service catalog for customers, providers, and managers. So let's not overproduce. Let's start by putting a simple demand management funnel in front of a requested or potential service and begin to test if they're worth building. Less, but better. Next, let's get a common language. And this is almost always something we have to recommend because without it, we'll never have a foundation. We can start with ITIL, in use about IT services across IT, or at least any group that will be building or delivering services if it's not IT-wide. But we all need to speak the same language. We have an extended IT services dictionary you can have if you want a good starting place. So along with not overproducing, we need a customer-centric orientation in place before we build lots of services, as evidenced by a set of design principles that will act as guiding lights for building our services. If you like, you can use our 5 principles. They have been our guiding lights for the past 2 to 3 years. And last, we want to build for manageability. If we're going to have hundreds of services, then let's start by creating a framework that will enable us to understand and organize them for customers, providers, and managers. Let's build and start using a service taxonomy before we create hundreds of services. Here are the benefits of fixing volume. Right out of the box, we are under control from the start. It's certainly an order of magnitude harder to get control once the horse is already out of the barn, after we've created hundreds of services that are confusing everyone and are not liked or used. When we talk with customers who have built hundreds of services and ask them how many are used regularly, it's usually 20% or less. Most will admit that as many as 50% of the services have never been used at all. This is very damaging to us. These pollute our service catalog and hurt our reputation. Less is more by not building lots of bad services. But you may say to me, hey, we have to build it if the customer asks for it. Well, maybe and maybe not. Because it's your reputation, not theirs, that will be damaged by the poor service. I think that quote-unquote we have to answer is a cop-out. I think we have a professional responsibility to help guide our customers in making good decisions about what services to build through our demand management process. Last, being premeditated about volume and how we will deliver it helps all the constituents, the customers, the providers, and the managers. So we talked about creating hundreds of services quickly in the volume section. As different people and parts of IT get into the service creating game, every service created is unique and potentially vastly different from the next. This could even be true for a single person who creates 5 services. The 5th service I create might be radically different than the first one I created. We call this syndrome 1,000 rifle shots. Every one is unique. The impact of this is a real showstopper. We all buy things on Amazon. Imagine that if the process for buying something was totally different for buying toiletries versus buying a floor lamp. Maybe the toiletries end-to-end experience is good, but the floor lamp one is bad. So would you say some Amazon experiences are good and some are bad? No, you would say Amazon stinks. You might even be angry because your expectations had been raised by excellent toiletries. So the customer is confused and angry. They aren't going to use the service. The provider has a similar problem. How do they deliver a service if every service is unique? Since there's no consistency, there's no economy. Every action is custom. There's no learning, repetition, and improvement that comes from a common pattern. As the manager, it's the worst of all. Without forethought of design, it's more likely than not that there is no control or governance built into the service. So lack of consistency essentially will ensure your failure. Fixing consistency can be accomplished with focus on 3 things. First, we need to get everyone involved to understand 2 things. Every individual service begins with a customer request and ends with a customer outcome. That's the end-to-end nature of any service. And there is a services life cycle. For every service, we'll need to decide, should it be built, build it, bring it to life, run it, and eventually retire it. Understanding this allows us to see the value of the next item, the service design process. Nothing is more critical for service consistency than a complete enterprise-level service design process. It ensures that a consistent assembly line-like approach is taken in the construction of every service. This is how GM is able to build 100 models of transmissions every year for millions of cars with a Six Sigma level of quality. Just like GM, a properly built service design process has governance and manageability baked right into it. So we aren't trying to apply it as an afterthought. Last, virtually every service we deliver end-to-end is made up of lots of little services, little sub-services. Looks like the presentation subservice is actually spelled sub-C. That is subservice.
It is subservice.
So since it's made up of all these little services, it kind of relates to the principle we have, one of our principles. Everyone has customers and everyone has services. And the more we apply 80-20 thinking, we can reduce the variety of subservices we need to provide. So it's important to use configuration management to track these subservices, making them reliable objects or building blocks that we can easily call and use when constructing a new service or modifying an existing one. Consistency of end-to-end customer experience that consistency is what has made Amazon the most highly rated retailer worldwide, and you can't even talk to them. Zappos, Airbnb, Uber, and hundreds of others all follow the same model. Exceptional end-to-end customer experience driven by customer self-service. That's a magical combination. And, if we ever wonder what's it like to be the customer, we all have those experiences in our lives, so we can always snap our mindset. We can always snap our frame and be the customer and say, that's what I want, or that's what my customer is looking for, right? So consistency is a factory-like motion, which means higher volume, lower cost, and better outcomes all together. By building effective governance into the service design process and enabling it with elegant self-service, we can get providers across different parts of IT to build services themselves that meet our services standards with little or no interaction on our part, thereby meeting the needs of customers, providers, and managers in a factory-like manner. It is a lot of work to build and maintain services. The true total cost of building a service is usually much higher than people want to realize. It's not just the development of the code, and we all know that. And the cost of maintaining and delivering the service over its useful life is many times more, the invisible part of the iceberg. So we simply don't want to build services that aren't worth building. But that is not the reality for most of us today. We may be cranking out services as fast as we can, or as I often hear from customers, our control over whether or not we build a service is whether or not the customer asking for it has the money. We are ending up with potentially a lot of poor services or services with no real value that will never be used. And as mentioned before, they hurt our reputation, not the customers, not the other people that have asked for it, because they're in our service catalog. I haven't really put a lot of energy into thinking about durability as a big factor until this webinar, really, probably because I'm guilty of some IT groupthink, thinking of getting something into service instead of thinking of what it might look like over its entire useful life. This is kind of reflected in a saying that we have here that everyone laughs when they hear, but it's also one of those things that's true, that the customer experience actually only begins when IT thinks the work is done. Sort of changes your mind. So when we think about durability, we want to try to better understand the true lifecycle cost and value of a service in advance of building it. So here are 3 things that can help. First, we want to recognize and be totally aware that our faulty thinking about cost and value is in place, right? And we have to recognize that, and we have to think that useful life is not just the go live. Next, let's take the demand funnel work we've already done borrow a bit from our PPM thinking, and then extend both our expected cost and expected value for a potential service over what we perceive to be the useful life. Could it be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, right? What is that? What are we thinking that useful life is? Now, you could say, well, we're going to be guessing. And will this be 100% or even 90% accurate? No, probably not. But it will certainly be a lot more accurate than what we are doing today, which is not considering it at all. Last, as long as we're looking out over a longer horizon, we really ought to think about the strategic benefits too. A lot of times they're there, but we just don't think about them. Will it improve the customer experience in a way that frees up their time or magnifies their power? Will it enable new skills that could give competitive advantage? Will it reduce time to market for a key initiative? If you think it's not possible, that's not true. You look at something like Amazon Web Services or maybe another one of those providers, it's not just them. Here's a couple examples. If I am a startup, I'll have a powerful, flexible global infrastructure in place and operational my first day in business. In the past, I might spend 2 years and millions of dollars putting it in place. If I'm a researcher, I can instantly spin up 500 servers for 10 minutes to run a simulation for $100. Those are game-changing kind of things. Better understanding both the true cost of a service over life and the value should improve our decision-making right up front. The other value of understanding the value of the service over life is it may change what we decide to build and how much we're willing to invest to make it right. Considering durability further improves our ability to weed out services to like another level not worth building, thereby making our overall portfolio of services that much better. Durable services should be better built. If they're going to last for a long time and have a lot of use, we can invest more in them. They deserve the forethought, and are worthy of the investment. And they shouldn't be built the same way a temporary or lower value service might be constructed. The quality, in many ways, is the sum and outcome of the other 3 big challenges, plus some other things. So building on everything we've discussed so far for the other 3, here's kind of where we added these pieces up. We have hundreds of individual, unique services, each with unique control and governance ranging from some to none at all. All are custom, without standards, and there's no way to individually manage them, much less manage them as a portfolio. So customers won't use them, providers will go around them, and managers won't be able to understand them. So here are 3 keys that can help you fix quality. Along with the thinking we discussed earlier on understanding that a service is an end-to-end customer experience, we have to take that a step further and assign individual services ownership. Make someone in IT personally responsible for the quality and performance of that service. Then we have to make them visible and link that visibility to social customer feedback like the 5 stars rating system. This is a tough cultural challenge in IT, but we have to tackle it or we'll just be wasting our time overall. First off, the person you designate as the service owner will be nervous and claim they can't own the service because they don't control everyone who's part of delivering it. Welcome to the business world. Execution is always a team activity with people we don't control. How it works. Next, that owner will not want visible service quality ratings because they're concerned that they'll be bad. This is why IT has, really avoided customer feedback. A lot of cases. But whether I run a B&B in Vermont or I sell watches on eBay, live social customer feedback is today's business reality. I mean, it's there and it's here to stay. And the standard is what we will have to perform to. So we might as well get on board with it. Next, the service owner will be particularly interested in clearly understanding and communicating the end-to-end value chain that delivers the service they are responsible for, and to make sure that the people supporting her understand it too. So it's funny how having someone accept ownership then fuels someone to take action against that second issue, right? The service owner is going to care about this. Last, once we understand that value chain, We want to be able to set and meet or exceed the customer's expectations 99% of the time. So in addition to direct customer feedback, we'll want to be able to measure and communicate to all involved how our value chain is delivering right down to the smallest subservice. So, if we fix customer quality on top of the other three, we get a first-class customer experience end-to-end. And we can deliver it service by service as well as at the portfolio level, day in and day out. This is a durable thing. We also get an enterprise services engine, a factory-like way of building and maintaining services over their useful lives. Last, a close and constantly evolving services-based relationship with our customers improves our understanding of what they need as well as our ability to deliver it. This is mirrored inside IT. We reflect it as we align our thinking and efforts to delivering services rather than technical outcomes. So here's the closing thought. Services, I'm going to read it. Services and customer-centric thinking are a magical bridge from technical siloed IT to modern service broker IT. As we have been leading our customers in customer-centric IT over the past 3 years, it has become clear to us that these are the two most powerful levers there are to make this transformation a reality. Okay, so that's it for our presentation today. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff for demonstration of some of this stuff we've talked about.
Thank you, Don. So I'm going to start where I oftentimes start. I'm going to start with our self-service portal, and this, again, is built on the content management system of ServiceNow. And this is where our consumers can go to consume information about our services, submit service requests, track the status of those requests. The other thing I'd like to highlight with this, too, is this is also a vehicle where we can push information to our consumers, either broadcast news and announcements, push alerts, or push specific messages to our consumers to highlight things that are going on in our organization. This particular environment, this is our default kind of Metro-style branded portal. And I'm going to change things up a little bit from my other demos just so it's a little fresh for those who come to our regular webinars. And I'm going to actually use a different kind of look and feel skin for a lot of the portal presentation today, just so get a little bit of a different look and feel. And first thing I want to go to is there's an area where we can go to see our different services and how they're organized and presented to our consumers. And so this is really where we have our kind of published list of our active service catalog, and it's in a, see the toggle here, in a service taxonomy or service listing perspective. And some of the purpose for displaying this information, is again to provide, as Don indicated, some of that clarity in customer expectations, provide some transparency to our customers as to what we're providing to them, as well as align in language the common terms and common information that we provide to our consumers. There are some different perspectives on here. So there is a My Services section, and this really is going to show me services specific to me where I'm an active subscriber. And subscription can come from either an individual assignment or more likely comes from an inheritance to my department, my location, my group, or my company. Don indicated as well there is a rating system, right? So we can also look at and show services from which are the highest rated based off of volume as well as the rating scores. So as you kind of saw, and there are some options here for me to jump into a different category or a different area, and you'll see as I dig into different sections that will reveal the different services that are available in those classifications. So if I want to, say for example, look deeper into personal computing and mobility, I can jump to that section, kind of see what are the different items that are in, say, PCs, tablets, printers, and accessories, and then I could drill in and look at some of these services. Now, where are these services? One of the tools that Don hit on early in the presentation that we use in a lot of our design activities is we'll use some XMind software to organize the taxonomy and help visualize how it'll look from a consumer drilling into perspective. And one of the things that we have available to us is the ability to take that XMIME data and load it into ServiceNow. And so the way it looks, it's something like this, where we will export it out to a CSV file. All right, and then we can take this and we can paste it in here. It'll analyze our different structure, define which ones are our categories, which ones are our business services, and then we can load and process those. And it's useful especially for an initial setup of a classification structure for our services, but also helpful for modifications to that structure. I will say from a services design and service detail perspective, it is typically recommended that we manage those updates directly in ServiceNow, utilize things like change management to communicate those material changes as we're updating those services that would impact our consumers. All right, so let me go into one of these services to show you kind of the tombstone view of this. So this is what we'll call kind of a service brochure or a service tombstone, and you'll see summary information about what the service is, who it's available to, requirements. There's options to request different items in context of the service. You can also learn about what's in scope, what's out of scope. If there are different offerings and commitments, we'll see those here. Health and status information, any active alerts, outages, upcoming planned maintenance activities we reported on this tab. And then there's also an area where we report and show some of that feedback and qualitative rating information that's been provided. Notice also there's an area where we can define the different knowledge that we want to communicate to our consumers that's contextually relevant to this particular service. So if I'm a consumer of expense management, I might want to come here to answer some of my common questions related to maybe how do I what do I do the first time when I access the software, what do I do when I need to book a flight. All those I can learn kind of as a promotion of here's the top questions that people tend to ask. In terms of requesting items, this would take me to kind of the ordering section of the portal where I could go and request and order this particular request, or I could learn more about the service, kind of go back and forth between the two areas. One other service page I want to highlight. So I showed kind of the service health from a kind of individual service perspective on that tab. There is a more macro view here of what are all active service outages, any upcoming planned maintenance activities, as well as the organization of our services from a dashboard and health listing perspective. And if I wanted to learn any more about these, I can obviously drill into any of these items and see some of the details about this service as I dig into it. All right, so that's kind of the portal side of it. Let me move to kind of the creation of a service so you can kind of see some of the components that go into building these services and kind of see how it then presents on that portal. So I'm going to go in and create a new service. I'm going to go, oops, not servers, business services. And my service, new here. And so I'm going to create a new service. I'm going to call this, what did I want to call this? I'm going to call this Technology Training Services. I'll go ahead and make myself the owner of this service. I'll give it a version number, just say it's our version 1. I'm going to assign it to a primary support group that will be who would be contacted in regards to this particular service. And then for some of the other details, let me just copy and paste some of these in here so you can you don't have to watch me type all this. I'm going to put some descriptive information in here, and I'm going to put in some at-a-glance information. And this, again, it can be formatted, in this case some HTML code that I can stick in here. There's also areas where I could highlight features, benefits, different contact information. In this case, I do also want to give it just a little picture, just to give it a little bit of kind of graphical element to it as well. So there's kind of my service definition. One thing I didn't do is I didn't put it into my particular area of the taxonomy, so I want to go and do that. And since this is training related, I'm actually going to put this under our Professional Services, Training Services branch. And I'll save that. Now I've got a kind of a service definition out here. And one of the things that I want to highlight, and Don mentioned this in some of the slides, is these services can be made up of many sub-services. So I actually want to link this service to another service that is a dependency or component of this particular training service. And that is specifically that we use some lab provisioning services to provision training instances that we can use to support our training classes. So I'm going to build a dependency relationship between that, and then that ultimately built out a number of other related dependencies to our configuration database based off of that one linkage. Just to show this in a more consumable view, I'll throw this up in a map view here. So you can see by making that one linkage to our lab provisioning service, it now is dependent on an application, dependent on identity management that is used to support the application, as well as the various servers and other sub-services that make up and support identity management. So the other thing I want to do here on my service, so if you remember on my service tombstone page, I had an area for knowledge articles and an area for things to request. And where I can make that linkage is there's a couple areas on here where I can define what are the different request items that I want to make associated with this particular service. Also, what are the kind of knowledge articles that I want to highlight. So I've already kind of created, these are filters. So I've already kind of created a filter out here for kind of technical training knowledge articles that keys in on some of the key items I want to show. And I did the same thing for training items. For my request items, which again is another filter that will highlight specific items that I can request in context of training. And I can also override kind of the label here, and I'm just going to say submit a training request. So I'll save that. So one other thing I want to do on my service record, if I go back to that, is now that I've got relationships between my server or my service and some of these other subcomponents, one of the things that this dependency relationship provides to me is I can define some rules as to how do these different components impact the health and or the status of my particular, say in this case, technology training service. So the way this page kind of reads is these are all the different components that my service is dependent upon, and that if any of these items were to go into a degraded or outage kind of state, it would show my service as being degraded or in an outage state as well. A couple things I can do is I can do things like create clusters. So I can say like application cluster, which is to say that these two components, independent of, if both of them have to be in a degraded or down state in order to have any impact on my particular service. Same thing, and I can also do a thing here where I can say certain components have no impact on my particular service. And so I'm going to go ahead and save that. And just to kind of show you these rules in action, let me go create an outage record. I'm going to create an incident, and I will set myself as the caller here. And I'm going to say currently unresponsive, and I'm going to put in one of my components here. Put in the right server. If you remember that I had in my map this server, which is way down here on the bottom end of our tree, that's the one I'm representing here as being down or in an outage kind of state. So I'm going to go create an outage record for that component. And I'm going to just kind of duplicate my message, responsive, and then I'm going to start my outage now. And that one outage record, now I actually created 10 different outage records that are all linked and tied to each other. And just to highlight that, if I were to, say, change this from, say, this actually started a couple hours earlier, what you'll find is that all these items are linked and related to each other. And you'll notice in here, this is our service that we just created, Technology Training Services, is now reporting as having an outage as a relation to this particular component. All right, so if I were to come back out to our health dashboard that we had out here, What we find now is a whole bunch of outages that are spawned out here for services that I care about. As the owner of our technology training service, I also have some extra options out here to annotate this outage and communicate some information to my consumers as to what's happening, how we're working through this issue, and ultimately reaching resolution for those users. Just to kind of clear this out, I'm going to just go into one of these records. I'm going to end this outage now just so it's clear from the queue. It might take a second or two as it goes through and recompute some of our availability numbers tied to our services. While it's doing that, I'll do a refresh here just to make sure that it does indeed clear our status page. And so notice now our status page is a little cleaner than it was before. So the next thing I want to just kind of show now that I'm back kind of in the portal, we've created a service, is now if I were to jump down to our professional services area and dig into training services, now I see our new technology training service that we defined. Here's that tombstone of information that kind of filled in. Here's the at-a-glance information. No offering status. There was an outage today that I can notate here. And here's some of the knowledge articles that we've associated with those kind of links and queries, as well as some of the items to request, which are training related, some classes we can take online, as well as requesting, say, a training environment. And what I want to show now is kind of requesting kind of something in context to this service. So for example, I could request, say, a new training environment, which is provisioning a lab environment for me. From here, it'll show me different classes or types of lab environments that I can get to kind of play with. And maybe I want to learn more about Drupal, so I want to spin up an environment specific to that. I'm just going to give it a name, called my Drupal environment. I need to learn Drupal, and I can kind of ask for some of these things are defaults in terms of when's it going to expire. It gives me 10 days to kind of work with this lab environment. I can also choose to order or to have it start up on creation. So if I go order now, it should be dropped into my status page to kind of track where it is in the workflow. So I see that it's scheduled to be delivered tomorrow. I can see it's awaiting approval, so there's some authorization that has to happen in order to get this new training environment for me to use. I go into track details, I can kind of see more details. I see it's in a waiting for LMS support to actually approve this particular request. All right, so just to kind of show this on the other side, and come out here to that request record. See all the details that were filled in by the user. Here's the individuals that are awaiting approval. These are driven from this LMS support group that authorizes this particular environment. I'm going to approve on their behalf. Button it kind of save here. Now it's approved. I'll come back out here. I'll see now that it's in a provisioning environment state. And it's going to continue to update here as it goes out and actually provisions this environment for me. So I'll let it kind of run a little bit here as it moves along. And this is a case where we're actually doing integration and orchestration out to another product out here, a product called SkyTap, to actually spin up these environments and kind of duplicate and create a full kind of lab environment for me to work with and kind of play with. Kind of show you the workflow behind here. You'll see there's a step here to do kind of the approval, some scripts to provision that environment, some waiting for completion, ultimately notifying me that here's my environment to work with, and then asking for me to verify that everything is set up to my satisfaction. So I come back here, I'll see the provisioning environment is done. Got a link here to launch my environment. I can see it's starting up right now, but I can verify it looks like everything is where it needs to be. So that makes me happy. So I can come over here and look at, wants me to confirm that everything is working to my satisfaction. And if it wasn't working to my satisfaction, I can always say no, provide some additional details, which then in the workflow would then route as a task for remediation or if I say yes, then my overall request would now be in a completed status, and all work has been fully provisioned for me to utilize this, this environment as part of that training service. One other kind of just point, there's also another place out here for me to go look at what are those specific training environments or lab environments that have been set up on my behalf. This becomes another place where I can go out and launch and see those environments and interact with them and kind of go through my training curriculum. So that kind of concludes what I hope to show today. I hope this was helpful in seeing both kind of the portal experience, the service definition and the components, as well as kind of linking the service to self-help knowledge, and well as linking the service to requestable components that can ultimately be provisioned and orchestrated to drive that service that the users are looking for.
Thank you, Jeff. So if you found that interesting, here are some possible next steps. If you're interested in what Jeff demonstrated in our advanced self-service catalog and portal, it's available as a fully functioning self-service demo. You can either get it on the ServiceNow store, or you can get it by accessing our website. It's fun, easy to use. I think we have over 800 now have signed up for it and using it. So you can't get hurt by it, and it's very intuitive. And it might help you in your thinking, right? How things fit together or why they might fit together. You can get your own login and be using it very quickly, so feel free. If you would like a copy of one of our consulting guides, we have it around services definition, we have it around the taxonomy, a service taxonomy guide, and a services governance guide. Just reply via email to Stephanie, and we'll be in touch to get it to you. And last but not least, if you're interested in establishing a clear service catalog, direction, customer-centric direction, and a roadmap, maybe take a deeper look at our 2-week offering. I think that's all we've got to cover, so we'll open it up for questions if we have any.
We do have some. First of all, if you're interested in any of those items that Don just mentioned, you can email me, and probably the easiest email for me is marketing@evergreensys.com. That's marketing@evergreensys.com. Don, first question is for you. And it says, you mentioned some IP that you used in your 2-week assessment. Did I understand correctly that the customer gets to keep that after the engagement?
Yes, actually, we had that question a couple weeks ago. You get to keep it and use it to your heart's content, right? We actually will even train you on using it during the 2-week process, because that's how we work together to create services, to do some of the other things we're doing, to create a draft taxonomy. We use the technology and the tools that we've built, and then you can extend them with it afterward. The kind of pieces we're talking about include the design guides, our service taxonomy model, and our mind mapping technology, the tool that we've built there, our services, roles and responsibilities, matrices and RACI, and our service design process, that detailed full lifecycle process for building the service. There's a lot of other stuff too, but those are the big pieces.
Great, thanks, Don. And Don, I'm not sure if this is for you or Jeff, and let me read this one. It says, is there a best practice to isolate the service request catalog taxonomy from the service catalog taxonomy if you are using the same service catalogs?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a process question. I think I should answer that one, Jeff.
I'll let you, Don.
Yeah, thank you. I don't get that many. Okay, so is there a best practice to isolate requests, right, the taxonomy for requests from the taxonomy or the service catalog for services, right, if you're using the same service catalog? That's a really good question. We run whole webinars on just the difference between service and request, and it can be a challenging question. So the first thing to say, I think, is at the highest level that we want to make sure that we understand the difference between a service and a request. And a service is something that's durable, and it carries commitment over time. And it would be, for example, providing Oracle database as a service. Providing that service, that's a service, okay? A request is transactional, and once it's done, once it's delivered or completed, it's done. Its life ends. And an example of that might be provisioning Oracle database service for someone, or the GET. I want to be added to that. That's a request. You can see how that request ends. The other thing you can see right there is that all requests are always attached to some service. They're always part of a service. Even if I'm just ordering software from a request catalog per se, it's still a service, which is the software store that we have, right, or our IT store that's inside our organization. So there's always a service behind it, right? And most requests have some variation of add, change, or remove. So, okay, as a background, there's only one service catalog or service taxonomy. There's only one, but there can be lots of subsections of it. And as we present the catalog to consumers in our organization, we can do it any way we want to. It doesn't violate any rules. And typically, we do have a separate request catalog subset that will demonstrate and show and put together for clients for the typical things, the common kind of requests that people are making about, could be for laptops, tablets, software, the very, very kind of common request items. We also have the service catalog area, right, for the services. Here's financial, HR, here's facilities, here's you get the idea. There's a separate service catalog section. But what we've done to extend that is we'll take and we will attach, like Jeff showed you, I think it was for the expense application, the requests against that are attached right to the service, right? When we see that service tombstone, you can see the requests right there. And we did that for customer convenience. Because if you read that and you say, I do want this app, you ought to be able to request it right there. Right? So that's the answer is, yeah, absolutely. And you can present, and there's a good best practice by keeping the two separately in our minds and then presenting them in whatever we think makes the most sense for the customer.
Wow. Hard.
Don't answer that one.
Yeah, Don's sweating. Okay, great. I got another one. Do you have experience using this application interfacing with back-end host platforms where there is a more complex, tightly coupled relationship than the one shown? Good to you, Jeff. Do you want me to read that again?
Oh, I can see it here. Yeah, so I think we have lots of examples. I'm assuming they're kind of asking about some of the orchestration, automation, and the relationship between the service and its components and pieces and sub-services. And certainly, some examples we set up are going to be simpler than others. Some orchestration and workflows are one or two steps. Sometimes it's a web of multiple different sub-workflows that orchestrate and run. So I think there are certainly lots of examples that we've worked on in the past, either related to infrastructure-related provisioning, orchestration activities, to kind of spin up new servers and all the other networking components and pieces and parts that need to go into that to put it on the right segment in the network and so forth. To other places where we do more end-user computing and software provisioning and software distribution. We've seen that in the orchestrated world. So I think they're certainly complicated setups that we've done before. I see he's putting host equals mainframe. So we haven't had a lot of examples for orchestrating into the mainframe environment, but assuming the APIs exist and there's ways for us to interface with that kind of those the mainframe componentry to set up different activities or pieces and parts, then certainly it's all something that should be possible within the ServiceNow orchestration component.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And Jeff, I think this one's for you as well. For the related outage records, do you need the SLA plugin for the service portfolio, or is the BSM mapping the only thing that is required?
So there is a plugin. I guess there are a couple plugins worth noting in regards to that question. There is a task outage plugin, which is really the ability to create an outage record from a task record, which is what I did in terms of creating an outage record from an incident. So there's that piece. But the SLA plugin that's part of the service portfolio is really only needed for purposes of if you're trying to track the actual availability commitments against a service. So that you would activate that plugin if you were actually going to define a availability commitment on, say, my technology training service. And then when the outage occurred to my technology training service, that would then start to go against or kind of count that outage as part of my, am I meeting my commitment or not?
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. And I had a question. Yes, I will be sending this presentation out to everyone, the full recording as well as the slides. So I just got the question. So thank you, Diane. We will definitely get that to you and everyone on the phone. Also, dawned on me I didn't explain to people how to get their questions in today. I was in such a rush to get started. So most of you have figured it out. You can use the chat panel or the questions panel, and they will come to me, and I will make sure that they get to the right person. A few more questions, and we will take questions a few minutes past the hour. So if you have them, please submit them. Jeff, one for you. Is there a limit to the number of levels you can build the service taxonomy?
And I'll let Don chime in on this too if he wants. But so from a ServiceNow technical perspective, I'd say no. From a mind mapping perspective, the answer is also no. But we obviously, we've hit on a couple of times, we need to consider the user experience, and in particular for browsing that service taxonomy. If the user has to drill 10 levels deep to find the service, that may not be the best experience all in all. I'd say in most of the taxonomies we outline for our customers, we kind of see 2 to 3 levels as kind of a common, with some branches that may go down into, some cases may go down to 4 or 6 levels of depth. But in short, there's no limit, but we do want it to be meaningful and usable by the consumers.
Yeah, and it actually represents a balancing act between the customer and the provider. Right, and an organization, logical organization of that service, as well as the customer's experience in finding the service. And they may just get it through search anyhow. They're not necessarily going to go through the taxonomy, but there will be times when that happens, or they're going to land in some part of what is reflected in the taxonomy. That experience has to be right. And the other thing that we use is something called Miller's number, which was a research scientist, I think World War II, basically came up with a number, which is it's 7 plus or minus 2. And that means that the human, can absorb 7 things with a pretty high degree of consistency and accuracy. If you get to 5, they're always going to get it. If you get to 9, not many are going to get it. So that's where you go, sort of like 7 plus or minus 2. Somewhere in that range. That's why you can't have a drop-down list with 30 things on it. It's absolutely useless, right? So these are the kind of principles that we have to put in play when we're designing a taxonomy. And it's a balancing act, again, between the provider and the customer.
Jeff, I think this is probably for you. When there are many tasks per service request, how are the SLAs set up?
That's a good question, and I'll also let Don echo or chime in on this too if he wants. But I think this is it's kind of a difficult topic in the sense. But if you take, like, say, an onboarding request, there should be some overall commitment of here's how long, or here's when we can reasonably expect to deliver that request to the customer, complete that request. Now, that there may be, as indicated in the question, there may be many different activities and tasks that need to be performed. So I would see the individual tasks and activities as kind of OLAs. So there's some sort of agreement as to how long each of those independent tasks are going to occur. And then, ultimately that's going to define some critical path of what is, if you add all the different critical path tasks together and the OLAs for those, that should give you some reasonable time as to what you can use as what should my commitment be to my customer. You may buffer it a little bit too to make sure that there's some wiggle room for deviations and things of that nature.
Yeah, and that's actually, I will add to that, it's a magical thing, okay? Because all these services are delivery chains of subservices, right? And when we as subservice providers understand what our LOA is, we've got to do this in 1 hour or whatever it is, we also see our role in the bigger picture. We say, hey, we're trying to deliver this thing to this customer in 6 hours. And so everybody now has customer alignment. And they're not just cogs in the wheel anymore. And people start to work to improve it. And that service owner is working with that team because the service owner sees the whole supply chain. They say, this is my service chain and you are my people. And we're doing this together. And it totally changes the mentality around it. So this SLA and OLA combination, and adding these things up, it's a very powerful behavioral change tool.
Guys, I don't know if you saw the follow-up question that came from Victoria on that. You see those? So can the SLAs be set up consecutive or can they be parallel? Meant to say, do they need to be consecutive or can they be parallel?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a ServiceNow perspective, there's many places you can assign SLAs to meet a target. I mean, so typically I would say, like again on the onboarding request example, you would attach an SLA to the overall onboarding request to say, hey, it needs to be done in 5 business days. But they may also set up SLAs at the individual, say, procurement step or the facility setup step or something of those nature in terms of how long each of those steps are going to happen. And in that workflow, you're going to have some things that can happen kind of at the same time running in parallel, and you're going to have some things that need to kind of chain together in terms of one input leads in, or one output leads into the inputs of the next kind of task. But ultimately, the service commitment you make back to the customer needs to take those into account, right, in terms of what is the optimal delivery time of all the different components and OLAs that go into that, and then, as I said before, add a little room for buffer to make sure you can achieve it on a regular basis.
Yeah, and Jeff, that's a really good question too, Victoria. It's a cool one because if you think about it, not only can it follows the nature of the work. It can be parallel, it could be serial, but it also asks, hey, let's understand the nature of the work because maybe there's a task that we've got down the line that could start earlier because it doesn't have a dependency, and we're just thinking serially, right? Or maybe we could carve it out and get a dependency accomplished sooner because it takes 8 hours and the rest of everything else is only 7 hours, right? So it makes you think about the work and the way the work is being delivered and re-engineer it to make it better. But without that visibility, you can't have that thought process with the group that is delivering that service.
Another question, Jeff, I think for you. Do we need a CMDB in order to provide service health?
So not necessarily. I mean, to do some of the cascade service impacts, from a dependent component up to an impacted service would, typically require a CMDB in those relationships for those dependent components being there. But for like purposes of what I kind of showed in the demo, the service health page, the dashboard, basically the data presented on that page keys off of kind of the outage records and their linkage to the services. So if you didn't have the CMDB and the relationships kind of built out, you could go and create those outage records directly to a service to kind of provide that same communication mechanism back to your consumers.
Okay, and I think our last one, we do a quick check here. So if you'll have any, you can send them in on the chat or questions panel. In the demo, a lab environment was provisioned for the user. Is that out of the box or something that Evergreen configured?
So in this particular case, it was something we at Evergreen configured, and it was done using kind of REST web services into SkyTap. But I will mention there are out-of-the-box orchestration-based integrations with Amazon EC2, Azure, and that can basically do some of the same similar actions of spinning up a computing environment. Basically, if the engine has some sort, and this is kind of a question earlier about like the mainframe, if the engine has some sort of web service-based API, we could integrate into it. And obviously chain that into a ServiceNow workflow to automate some activities for a user, and then wrap that around approvals or tasks or other activities that we want to do in context of that orchestration.
Great, thanks, Jeff. I don't see any other questions.
Let me make a plug.
Okay, all right.
If your Knowledge 16 is coming up in May, everyone, and if you're planning to attend, we will be exhibiting on the show floor. And I will definitely be there the whole time, and Jeff will be there. So we'd love to meet you in person.
Yeah,
if you want to come by.
We're in booth number 1725, and we never let Jeff leave. He does demos all day, all the time. So you can definitely catch him. But
no, we'd love to. Please, if you're going to be there, come by and introduce yourself, and we'd love to meet you.
Okay, great. Well, on that note, you will get an email from the ReadyTalk system, so meetings@readytalk.com, I believe. Same one you got your confirmation from later today or first thing tomorrow with the recording. We will have another event, I believe, around the first or second week of May. Don and I are firming that date up now. We'll be at Knowledge 16, the middle of May. We also have some live workshops going on across the country in Baltimore. So if you're in the Baltimore area, send me a note. We've got something going on next week. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.